Good evening and welcome to fall semester and to TED 402, which is Educational Psychology. My name is Jeff Miller and I will be your instructor for this semester. For those of you new to the online learning environment, this is going to be a wonderful experience for both of us. It is session 1, September 2nd, 2009, and I am looking forward to a variety of different interactive ways that we're going to communicate this semester. So we're going to get started tonight by giving you just a quick overview of what I'm going to be doing with you tonight. We're going to go over the course objectives to start. We also have our first of many guest appearances that will be occurring each week. So we will have Amanda Sattler from Junior Achievement coming in a little while. And we'll also take a look at Chapter 1 in your course textbook. So as we go through the semester, it's going to be a lot of reading, a lot of conversation, a lot of emailing, and I am looking forward to guiding you through this process. What we're going to be driving through the entire course with is a series of essential questions or critical questions. And the essential question that I have for you tonight has to do with good teaching. And when you look at what's going on, especially in the city of Los Angeles and nationwide, we know that education is a hot topic, and deciding what makes good teaching and what makes bad teaching is on the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And so what we're going to be looking at tonight in terms of an essential question is, what is good teaching? And what I'd like to start off with to get this ball rolling in terms of using multimedia in this course is a clip from a film from a number of years back that is going to illustrate not necessarily what good teaching is, but what bad teaching might be. It's a familiar clip to some of you, and we're going to use that as our first discussion point. So if we can roll that clip.
On education, we must trust students to learn if given the chance, and empower parents to demand results from our schools. In neighborhoods across our country, there are boys and girls with dreams, and a decent education is their only hope of achieving them. 6 years ago, we came together to pass the No Child Left Behind Act, and today, no one can deny its results. Last year, 4th and 8th graders achieved the highest math scores on record. Reading scores are on the rise. African American and Hispanic students posted all-time highs. Now we must...
That was not necessarily an example of bad teaching. That was our former president. We're going to be talking about No Child Left Behind a little later because that's guiding a lot of the different practices and principles of what's happening in our classrooms today. In fact, we're going to be looking at a variety of different perspectives having to do with No Child Left Behind. Now we're going to go back to the clip on what bad teaching is.
Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the Great Depression, passed the the tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which raised or lowered raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
Yes, voodoo economics, a classic clip from Ferris Bueller. That reason why I wanted to share that with you fundamentally is this, is that if you think back to a lot of the experiences you might have had in your educational upbringing, much like mine, I felt a lot like that, felt tired and felt confused and even drifted off to sleep where there was really no focus on student-centered learning or teacher-directed instruction. I mean, how do you feel at the end of that clip? My sense is, aside from the initial comedy of it, is that there's a sense of tiredness, a sense of boredom. And so what we're going to be looking at this semester is how do you affect good teaching? I mean, really, what constitutes a good classroom, a motivated classroom? And fundamentally, what we know is that good teaching and good teachers requires prepared learners. As you may know, if you've been in front of students before, is that teaching is obviously a multifaceted task. I mean, you've got to be able to multitask. You're dealing with classroom management. You're dealing with instruction. You're dealing with working with a variety of different learners at a variety of levels. And what we're going to be looking at this semester is trying to figure out how the theory addresses those components. Specifically, how do you engage kids in learning? How do you motivate kids? And how do you manage a classroom? So we're going to have a good time looking at this over the course of the semester. What we know about how to get kids engaged is fairly simple. Prepare engaging lessons. Talk to the kids. And rule number one when you're dealing with any sort of teaching scenario is know your audience. Work with the kids and get to know them and monitor understanding from beginning to end of the task. I remember a lot of times when I used to sit through my classes, it was like it was the teacher's show. And I was just sort of an innocent bystander, just waiting to see what was going to happen next and what was going to happen to me next, not rather what was going to happen with me. And so what we're going to really do as we go through this course is we're going to ask you to do a variety of different tasks. And so what I'd like to do is go over with you in a fundamental way what the structure of the course is going to look like. I know usually on the first night of class, people go and they pump the parking meters and they're waiting to see how quickly we're going to get out of class. What I will tell you is this, is read the syllabus carefully. Because what I'm going to do now is not read the syllabus to you, but I'm just going to try to go over a few key bullet points that you can use when you go on and look at the syllabus, which you can find on Blackboard.com. So the structure of the course is going to look kind of like this. First and foremost is that there is one primary assignment that you're going to be completing that's called a signature assignment. You will find that as you go through a variety of the different courses in teacher education that you'll be completing course requirements called signature assignments. And what they really are is it's your opportunity to demonstrate your mastery of the course information by completing one assignment that literally is the overview of the course. And what you're going to be doing in this signature assignment is going to a nearby school, and you're going to identify the school by yourself. If you have a friend that's a teacher, if you have a child that's in a classroom, go to that school, access and leverage your resources, and you're going to identify a school that's of interest to you. We have plenty of schools locally, and those of you that get absolutely stressed out about this experience, I'm sure I'll receive multiple emails from you, and my email you'll find is on Blackboard. But you're going to identify a local school, and then you're going to go and find one particular student who seems to be outside of the norm in one way or another. My suggestion and my experience in this would intimate that you really want to try to find someone that is behaviorally out of the norm, somebody that really struggles significantly with staying on task. And then what you're going to be doing is you're going to observe that student at 3 separate times for about 30 minutes a visit. And at the end of that, you're going to basically be writing up a narrative, an observation of what you saw, and then you're going to link it to a variety of concepts and terms and theories from this course. I will be posting multiple examples on Blackboard.com for you as we go throughout the semester. So you'll be able to see several different examples of how you might be able to frame this assignment. They're due November 4th, and they're due through TaskStream, and you'll be able to find instructions about how to use TaskStream on Blackboard.com. If you're not familiar with Blackboard.com, don't worry, you will be by the end of the semester. So in addition to the signature assignment, what else you're going to be evaluated on is your participation in the course, as well as an opportunity to teach junior achievement. And yes, there will be 3 exams that you'll be taking online. I'm going to come back to each of these points in a moment. But I wanted to just give you an overview of what you're going to be completing for your own edification over the next 15 or 16 weeks. Fundamentally, you have a signature assignment, course participation, an opportunity to engage with junior achievement, but there are other options as well. But I think you'll find that the junior achievement opportunity is by far the best way to go. And then last are the examinations, which will be totally multiple choice and will be based on the textbook. And I think that you'll find they'll be fair. You get to take them at home so you can use your textbook, so we'll have a good time with that. To come back quickly to the signature assignment, some of you are probably saying, wait a minute, that's a lot of information. Like, how am I going to actually go in and observe a student? What am I looking for, and how do I do this? And it doesn't make sense to me. So one way I think makes sense to people is to actually get an example. And since I can't bring a group of misbehaving students into the studio with me, what I would like to do is yet again go back to a very quick video clip. This is a 43-second video clip. It's in Spanish, so we're multi-representational here. And I think what you'll see is this. What I want you to look at is watch the student, which obviously is the video focusing on, and just watch the student behaviors. Because when you go into a classroom, what you're going to be doing is you're going to actually be looking at one student. And you're going to be watching exactly what it is that they do. And so I'm going to ask you to watch this video, focus on the student, and then we're going to come back and I'll give you a couple of quick examples for it. So if we can go to that video of the student.
En la clase anterior habíamos estado viendo un poquito el inicio de lo que es el análisis financiero. En esta clase vamos a ver los cuatro grupos de índices que miden o que tratan de medir la información financiera de una empresa. El primero hace relación con la capacidad que tiene una empresa para hacer sus pagos. El segundo grupo de índices tiene que ver con el endeudamiento que tiene una empresa, la capacidad de endeudamiento que tiene una empresa para hacer frente con sus pasivos.
How I love that video. Yeah, so what you look at is you'll be watching the student. Obviously, this was a video that was put together with this guy's buddy. But still, if you're the observer in the classroom, you're going to look and you're going to write down specific things that this person did. For example, how many times did he grab the person's hair? How many times did he touch the person? And you're going to be specific with that. And then you're going to link it to terms having to do with the course, which is what we're going to be doing on TV together. Is going over a lot of these terms. So you may link it to things like aggression, off-task behavior. What you're not going to do, and what the challenge is going to be for a lot of you, is not to focus on the teacher, but to focus on the student. And then you're going to be linking it to terms and theories. I know that a lot of people have a ton of questions about the signature assignment every time we do the class in person, so I'm sure some of you have questions. What I'm going to ask is this, is go and read the syllabus at least 2 times, carefully. And if you have questions, feel free to email me, or feel free to come to my office, which I'll give you that information in a little bit. The second component of this course is the course participation. And what you're going to have an opportunity to do, and actually what I'm really going to ask of you, is I want you to really participate in the course. And some of you are saying, well, participation may be defined just as watching the video, but in fact we have ways for you to communicate directly with me as we go throughout this experience. And there's 2 fundamental ways to do this. First is using the phone number. And the phone number is 800-339-1193. You can see it on the bottom of your screen. And you'll call in, and you'll be able to talk to someone and discuss what it is that you want to talk to me about. Then I'll bring you up, and we can have a conversation just like you're raising your hand in class. And I promise I will do my best to get to you as quickly as possible. And the second way is to log on to dhtv.csudh.edu, as you can see on the bottom of the screen there. And you'll be able to go and basically send me a text message. And it'll show up as a question that I'll be able to address specifically. What I'm going to really ask to make this course as interactive as humanly possible is that you set a goal for yourself of about 8 communications with me over the course of our time together. And if you can set that goal of maybe once a session at least, you are welcome to communicate with me as often as you want. In fact, I'd like that. But if you shoot for 8 either phone calls or texts, not emails outside of class, I'm talking about as we're going through this, then we can try to make this learning experience truly interactive, which is the real challenge for me, and I'm looking forward to having that. As we go through the rest of the pieces of the course, the other piece that you have an opportunity to complete is something that's called Junior Achievement. You can go online at jasocal.org, and you'll be able to take a look at some of the programs that they have, but we have a guest coming in a little while who's going to literally walk you through that. And I'm going to ask her some great questions. I've used Junior Achievement in my class for the last 5 years. And I've had students go in and you go in and you actually teach a preset curriculum to a group of students. And it is a blast. It is a wonderful experience. And really what I try to do with this, and what I've found the students have said overwhelmingly has been successful, is that they actually get an experience of teaching. Teacher credentialing programs are interesting in that a lot of times you go and you take a group of courses before you've ever gotten in front of a group of kids before. So by bringing Junior Achievement to you, you go in and you get to teach a preset curriculum. It is a wonderful curriculum. It is purely aligned to California state standards. And you get an opportunity to go in and interact with kids. And I think that is a unique opportunity. And again, we're going to have an interview for about 20 minutes or so with Amanda Sattler, who is the Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. And I think you'll find that to be a wonderful conversation. However, some of you may say that you don't have time to do Junior Achievement, so I can't force you to do certain things. But what I can do is give you options. What I do know about the world of motivation is that the first aspect of motivation is choosing to engage. And when you choose to participate, what you do, or when you have a choice to participate, your buy-in to the entire process increases significantly. So I'm going to give you several choices of things that you can complete as part of your coursework instead of completing the Junior Achievement requirement. So a couple of examples that you might want to think about. You may love to write empirical-based research literature reviews. So you can write a paper on something like how No Child Left Behind affects motivation, the relationship between motivation and math, identity formation and the internet. If these things if you're getting some terms that are confusing you, like self-efficacy and identity formation, don't stress. We're going to be covering those things in the next few weeks, and you'll be absolutely clear on these, I promise. What else might you consider is a PowerPoint on issues focusing on education related to educational psychology. You may choose to, if you're a Mac person, you may choose to do a digital film. I've had students do movies before, which have been great. They've gone and interviewed students and teachers, people from the community, people throughout time, on how technology's changed and how that affects the way that we communicate. And I think that that may be an opportunity. And none of these may seem necessarily appealing to you. And you may be sitting at home saying, wait a minute, I've got a great idea here. All I ask is that you communicate with me and we have a conversation about it. And then we can come to a mutually agreed upon project for you that'll make up part of your course grade. Now I know the piece that you're all excited for have to do with examinations. And so rather than give you one monster exam, which I know many of you would rather have, we're going to do 3 exams. And I'm going to give these to you in week 4, week 9, and week 14. And what they're going to be is you're going to be able to access them through Blackboard. There'll be multiple choice exams, and you'll be able to use your book and use everything, and I will try to get these returned to you electronically, obviously, as fast as possible. So those will come in the next few weeks and spread out. They're not going to be cumulative. They'll be just on what we cover through there. Okay, this would normally be the time where I take some questions, but that's relatively impossible right now. So I'd like to go over with you the course objectives. What are we going to be doing? Fundamentally, what your task is going to be over the next few months is to develop a working understanding of the terminology and the concepts related to educational psychology. The other sort of secondary objectives that I'm looking forward to having you engage with is to be introduced to a variety of experts in the field. I have different guests set up over the course of the semester that I'm really excited about. We've got people coming in from Los Angeles Unified School District that are going to talk about cyberbullying, which is a huge piece. What is cyberbullying? How is it defined? What can you as a teacher, as a parent, as a student know about it? How is it defined? We have a gang expert coming in and a variety of other guests that really will be wonderful and engaging, and you'll have an opportunity to call in and email questions in, and I think you will find it to be a fantastic experience, and I'm looking forward to having these people come in. Okay, so what is educational psychology? You signed up for this course. Maybe some of you took a Psych 101 course as an undergrad, and you're wondering, what is educational psychology? Well, the fundamental definition of it is it's the study of human interactional dynamics in learning environments. That's fun, isn't it? I'd rather define it to you in a different way. Fundamentally, it's this. Number one, and this is how we're going to basically be framing the course, is one, how do we develop? And by how do we develop, physically, cognitively, emotionally, socially, how are peer relationships formed? How are friendships formed? What's the role of bullying and victimization that goes on in schools? What does the brain have to do with learning? What's the role of theorists like Piaget and Vygotsky? And these will all be people that you're going to be familiar with as we go throughout the course. So we're going to look intently at how we develop. In fact, next week, we have Dennis Douillet, who is one of the students' favorite professors here at Dominguez Hills, who is a Piaget. I like to refer to him as a Piaget wizard. He doesn't like that. But he's going to come in and we're going to have a discussion about the role of development, cognitive development, and how Piaget looks at things. So we're going to look at how we develop. We're also going to look at how we learn. What is the process by which you store and retrieve information? But more importantly than just the theory of that, what are you going to do in your classroom that's going to make it easier for students to access information? And that is an enormous challenge in classrooms today. We know, for example, that there are tons of children that are diagnosed with ADD and ADHD. We know that special education services are multifaceted. We know that there's things like co-teaching, where we're bringing special education teachers and general education teachers together in the same classroom to collaborate to make learning environments better, more conducive for learning. So you don't have the Ben Stiller moment from Ferris Bueller, but rather you have engaged learning. And that's really what we're going to be looking at, which is one of the reasons why I want you to be thinking seriously about incorporating junior achievement into your coursework this semester. Third is we're going to be looking at what motivates us. My background, I didn't really tell you anything about myself, and so I'll take a minute or two here just to tell you a little about my background. I did my doctoral studies in motivation and learning, and I tend to look fundamentally through the motivational lens at how to engage students in learning. So when we look at what motivation is, that tends to be the easy out for a lot of people. They say, and if you go into teachers' lounges, which I do all the time working with schools, you hear, well, this student's not motivated. Well, why don't they do anything? Well, they're not motivated. Well, the question really is what is motivation? And is it the fact that they're not motivated, or they're not motivated to do what it is that the teacher's asking them to do? And those are two critical questions. So when we look at our essential question for tonight, which is what is good teaching, hand in hand with that is what is good learning? And what is good learning is going to be for you to define, not for me, to define for you. And some of you may, as you get into your teaching, you're going to reflect back to the teachers that you really enjoyed having as a kid. And you may find that when you get stressed, you try to mimic what they did. In fact, I know that when I teach live and with students in front of me, one of the things that I reflect on a lot are different professors that I had and different assignments that have been shared with me over time. So when you look at what motivates us, really the question is how do you get the kids to do what it is that you need them to do to be successful? And what we're going to do in a little while is we're going to define for you how the state and the federal government define student success. And that's through No Child Left Behind. We're not going to get to that yet, but that's how we define the end result. Your task is going to be, how do you develop a learning environment that's conducive to learning? And then, how do you get all these different kids to engage with the curriculum? Other things that we're going to look at is, how are we different? learner differences is enormous. Special education classrooms across the city, across the state, and across the country are taking students from special education classrooms and putting them into general education classrooms as a model of what's called full inclusion. And teachers need to know how all learners are different and how to design learning programs that will reach the needs of all learners. And you will hear that overwhelmingly. What's the goal of education? To reach the needs of all learners. But really, you have to look deeply at the theory to really start understanding what it is that entails. And so how you do that is by designing effective learning environments. And when you look at what a learning environment is, that goes far beyond just a classroom. A learning environment really has to do with the feel that you generate in a classroom through your rules, through your expectations, through your delivery, through your demeanor, through your appearance, through the way that you communicate with people. And these are all things that you're going to be grappling with over the years in the profession. So fundamentally, we're going to be looking at those things as we go throughout this course. And I think that what you will find as you start to do the reading, and the book that we're going to be using is a book written by Anita Woolfolk, and it's if we can get the overhead camera shot real quick, what you will see is that the title of the book is Educational Psychology. There it is, and it's the 11th edition. I know many people go out and they scour the internet looking for these earlier editions to it. This book, I can tell you overwhelmingly, is the best written and best presented text on educational psychology that exists out there. I'm not going to lie to you; it's expensive to get on the bookstore or online. But what I can tell you is that it's critical as you start to get into this profession to develop a reading library. And as you start to develop a library of resources to go back to, I find that students that keep this book go back to it over and over and over again. So I think that as you look at what we're going to be covering, which is cognitive development, emotional development, social development, moral development, friendship, bullying, standardized testing, it's all in your syllabus. What you're going to find is you're going to need an anchor to come back to. And that anchor really is in the form of this book. And so really, if you haven't gotten it yet, go out and get it. And you can go ahead and start reading it. I know some of you have actually already emailed me and have already gotten the book and have already started to read it. So what we're going to do tonight, and let's actually get into the book and start thinking about chapter 1, is what we're going to start taking a look at is what is good teaching? What is educational psychology? And one of our essential questions that we're looking at tonight has to do with our current president, not our former president that you saw in an earlier video clip. But one of the things that we know now is that President Obama is taking a look at how to evaluate teaching. Because that's a question that is going on across the country as we're looking at the surge of charter schools. And in fact, recently in the LA Times, one of the things that we've seen is there's a potential takeover of schools that may be coming in. And Green Dot schools and LA Alliance schools are serving students in wonderful ways. And charter schools are doing great work. Public schools and private schools and charter schools are all grappling with the same question, which is, how do we define good teaching? No Child Left Behind started to do that, but the question that you can see on the bottom is really an essential question, which is it right to look at how we evaluate teachers? Is this, in fact, the next step after No Child Left Behind? Because there are a significant number of critics out there that look at No Child Left Behind and wonder if this was, in fact, the best way to increase accountability. And you will find that as many arguments are for it, are arguments that are against it. And so the question starts to become, do we want to start posting results by individual teacher up for all to see? Is there a way to do that? Is that appropriate? Is that fair? And these are all questions that the experts are going to be grappling with over the next several years, I imagine. But when Obama is looking at the opportunity to evaluate teachers, and we actually have a video clip that we're going to get to later about Obama and looking at No Child Left Behind, what we really need to do for you first, for those of you that really aren't too familiar with it, is to define what No Child Left Behind actually is. And so fundamentally, the basics of No Child Left Behind is that this was presented by President Bush a number of years ago as a way to increase accountability in our classrooms. And it was generated through the use of test scores that were calculated in fundamentally to find out what the academic performance index is, to give a quantifiable score to how schools are doing. Because that's the bottom line question, which is, are the schools that are serving our students, are they successful? Who is successful and how are we measuring it? And what No Child Left Behind did was create something that is, the acronym is the AYP, or the Annual Yearly Progress, to see, are the schools making necessary progress? And if not, are there consequences or sanctions that are in place to help these schools get better? And obviously now, with the current state of the California economy, teachers and schools and principals are trying to figure out how to do more with less, or in a lot of cases, how to do more with nothing now. So what we know now is, in terms of trying to reach these goals, is we need expert teachers. And what we know about expert teachers, we get actually from the work of Anita Woolfolk, who did a lot of work in an area called teacher efficacy. And efficacy, as you'll find out later in the course, is basically synonymous with the term confidence. So what makes confident or good teachers? And we know that it's basically threefold, which is one, can they manage a classroom? Two, do they have knowledge of instructional strategies at their disposal? And three, can they reach the most difficult learner? Since that came from Woolfolk, and it was a study by Woolfolk, really we're going to be hitting those three pieces throughout the course. I know most of you are taking a classroom management course this semester, and what you'll find is there's an enormous amount of connection between educational psychology and classroom management. In fact, one of our guests that we have tentatively scheduled to come has authored a book on classroom management. So we're going to be able to talk with that author to get their views of it. What we know also comes from our former president. And one of the things that George Bush said was, when it comes to the education of our children, failure is not an option. And what I would like to actually do here in a moment is to cut back to that clip of President Bush giving the State of the Union address having to do with education and with No Child Left Behind, because I think that there are certain aspects of it that have been wildly successful and certain aspects of it that have not necessarily been successful. So if we can roll that clip of the State of the Union address, that would be wonderful.
On education, we must trust students to learn if given the chance, and empower parents to demand results from our schools. In neighborhoods across our country, there are boys and girls with dreams, and a decent education is their only hope of achieving them. 6 years ago, we came together to pass the No Child Left Behind Act, and today, no one can deny its results. Last year, 4th and 8th graders achieved the highest math scores on record. Reading scores are on the rise. African American and Hispanic students posted all-time highs. Now we must...
Question is, did they and are they? All-time highs, achieving at high levels. We have a graph here that will show you from 1992 to the year 2000. What you will in fact see is that that proficiency in reading did not necessarily increase significantly over that time. Now, this is a descriptive study that you'll be reading about in terms of what descriptive studies are. But if you can take a look at this, what you will see is that, over an 8-year period, test scores did not necessarily rise. And so, has it worked? Now, granted, No Child Left Behind came in right after this. But we also know that prior to No Child Left Behind, what we also have is another graph that shows reading scores and funding. And that's the graph that you see behind me and now on full screen. As you can see, is that up right until 2002, which is at the end, what we see is that spending started to go out the roof. But test scores are not increasing. We know that just from our own state here in California, that we still are spending a significant amount of money on education per student spending, per pupil spending, but our test scores are still not necessarily rising. Our schools are still struggling to the point that we have charter schools that are exploding. We had recently, in the last year or so, Mayor Villaraigosa took over several schools to try to implement change. It is truly a state right now where we are graduating, or not graduating, a number of students that truly are unable to pass things like the California high school exit exam. We have situations where there are students that are not prepared to come into college, and when they try to come into college, they're not experiencing the type of success that a high school diploma should mean. So to go back to No Child Left Behind, some of these slides we've borrowed graciously from the United States Department of Education. And so what I'd like to share with you now are the 4 reform principles that drove No Child Left Behind. And first is accountability. What you find across the board at every different school, in every different classroom, at every school district, in every organization for that matter. I know probably some of you out there have transitioned to education from business. Some of you may have you've come from a variety of industries, or some of you just came straight out of your undergraduate time. In every single organization, the one piece that must remain constant is that the people that are delivering services must be held accountable to deliver results. In fact, there's a lot of writing going on now about how to define success. And success really does not, and especially is to be considered now, does not rely on effort anymore. There was a time when if we tried hard, if we really worked hard, if we invested a tremendous amount of effort, and you'll learn how that fits into the whole scheme when we get to the motivation work, but effort does not imply success. We have to generate a system where we're accountable to delivering results. And what we know now, 8 or so years after No Child Left Behind really has been implemented, is that the results are not coming in to the level that they had wanted. I mean, the original goal was by 2013 we'd achieve total proficiency. We're here at 2009 right now, and we're nowhere near total proficiency. So accountability is one of the reform principles. Second is flexibility. And giving local schools, local districts, more autonomy to provide services. There was a large debate years ago about what should be the controlling body of education. Should it be federal? Should it be state? Should it be district? Should it be school? That's one of the real driving pieces and one of the real incentive pieces to get people to come to charter schools, for example. And in fact, as we go throughout the course, there's 1 or 2 principals of charter schools that are going to be coming in as guests that we'll be able to ask them questions truly about what does flexibility mean? What does accountability mean? Because charter schools are accountable, and I am in no way advocating that charter schools are better than public schools. You will never hear me say that. What I'm saying is that there are options, and flexibility and accountability are 2 tremendously wonderful leveraging points for these types of learning institutions. Third reform principle have to do with research-based reforms. One of the things that came to No Child Left Behind was this notion of a highly qualified teacher using research-based, empirically based practices. And so things like, as terms as you'll hear as we go throughout the course, like professional learning community, small learning community, are all research-based reforms. And so what ends up happening is that the schools get funding to try to deliver school reform using research-based change. And we're going to go through several of those different changes, but the idea here really is to increase the accountability and give some sort of flexibility to make independent decisions by the school with district support. And then fourth principle of reform is parental options. What we know, and I've got a slide on it a little bit down the way, is that if a school is not making sufficient growth over time, the parents can take their children out of that school. If the district is not making total growth, the parent can take the child out of the district. So it becomes a support and delivery piece, but they're trying to give parents options. So I don't think anybody can argue that the idea behind this is wonderful. It's just how is the implementation going? So the question about No Child Left Behind next is how will states measure progress for both schools and students? And as you look at how this comes into play, the first piece is that we are, or the schools are testing every child from grades 3 through grades 8 in both reading and math. And these scores are kept over time. So you can start seeing, are the schools making growth? Two is that states will implement fair and effective annual tests. And one of the things that we hear, and I've got a slide later about standardized tests, but one of the things that a lot of teachers voice concern about is, are we testing the kids to death? Are we giving them too much testing? And we're going to touch on that later. But the idea is we have to give some form of assessment to kids to get them engaged. And then finally is that the nation, Washington, D.C., will provide funding to states to both design and implement these fair and effective tests. So the idea is that we're giving options. We have 4 reform principles, but then the next question is, how will measuring progress every year help to improve our schools? And so as you look at looking at how the progress comes out, in fact, every August or so in the LA Times, you see the school test scores are published. It drives real estate. It moves people from school to try to get into other school. In fact, there are documentaries out there that are following people that are using bogus addresses just to get their kids in other schools. That's not the way that the system was really designed. So how is measuring progress every year, how is that going to help our schools? Fundamentally is this, is that competition breeds change. And if schools are seeing what other schools are doing well, then it gives them the incentive to try to follow along with what they're doing. So from an organizational basis, when we're giving tests that continue to come out all the time, and we see year by year how are schools changing, this gives the people that are working within the school, the teachers, the counselors, the administrators, tools to be able to start affecting positive change. But what happens if good and positive change doesn't happen? I mean, it's a great idea. Let's put highly qualified teachers in every classroom. Let's give support through professional development. But what if the schools don't get better? What if they don't improve? And that really was a large piece of the No Child Left Behind piece, which is if we make results public, what do we do about it? And fundamentally, what ends up happening is this. Schools that don't improve receive extra help with planning and with technical assistance. If they continue to not improve, what ends up happening is that they fall into a system called program improvement. And I know, trust me, that some of you are sitting out there going, there's lots of terms. And in education, it's kind of like it's an acronym crazy world. You'll hear things like API and AYP and PI and IEP and SDC. And we'll go over a lot of these as we go, so hang in there. But fundamentally, if schools don't improve, they fall into a state called program improvement, which means they get extra funding to try to improve the practices and delivery of service into the school. However, if the school does not meet their annual yearly growth target for 2 years consecutively, then the parents can transfer their child to another school, a successful public school, as we mentioned earlier. And one of the kickers is that the school district ends up having to pay for the bus to transport their kids to another district. So when you start thinking about this, there's lots of public information out there about how are the schools doing, how are the students doing, what do we do for help, and then what's the long-term solution. Now, there are schools out there that are in year 9 of program improvement, year 8 of program improvement, where they really feel as though they're floundering. And it's truly a tremendous challenge. One of the things that we look at continually in the educational world is trying to answer this question, which is No Child Left Behind, is it working? And when you think about how this is affecting the education of kids out there, and I know I have 2 adolescent daughters at home in middle school right now. My background is in middle-level education. And when I look at it, is the system truly working? I'm looking at things specifically, whether I like it or not. I look at test scores. I look at how is my daughter's school doing? How are comparative schools doing? That's what No Child Left Behind truly was designed to start doing, which was build a system of accountability. But the driving question is it working? Does it need to be rehauled, revamped? And who should do this work? There are lots of articles out there that I've been reading recently that are arguing that the large districts across the country should be broken up and run in smaller units. But then when you look at some of the smaller districts, some of the smaller districts are not delivering results that are necessarily any better than the larger districts. So then the bottom line question, again, comes back to what is good teaching? How do you reach these kids? And the end result is, are they testing well? So what I'd like to go to now is I actually have a clip. Katie Couric, who you may know as a newscaster, had a program, and she would do little snippets. And it's about a minute-long clip where she looks on her view about No Child Left Behind to start addressing the question of is this working? So we're going to go to that now.
Hi, everyone. Do standardized tests truly measure how well our kids perform in school and life? That's what some educators are asking since No Child Left Behind is up for congressional renewal this year. President Bush signed the No Child Left Behind Act into law back in 2002. It requires schools to test students in grades 3 to 8 every year in reading and math. Schools that fail to make progress face severe penalties like decreased funding. New proposals would make the penalties even harsher. Schools should be held to high standards, but some argue high-stakes testing has forced teachers to teach to the test, giving schools an excuse to cut civics and art classes because they're not a part of federal tests. Parents and teachers should work together on decisions about what and how children learn and find sensible ways to measure that. And Washington should do its homework and not just rubber stamp the bill. That's a page from my notebook. I'm Katie.
That drives a huge question out there, which is, how do you get parents involved? I'm now the father of 2 middle school kids, and it was interesting. We have dinner with people all the time, and one of the things that we talk about is what are ways for parents to get involved in middle school and high school when this is now a place that is not necessarily inviting to the kids. Everybody knows that in order to make education successful, you have to bring in a variety of stakeholders, including the parents, including the school, including the community. But the question that Katie Couric brings up is interesting. And it's the question that's out there with everybody, which is, are standardized tests the necessary evil? It's like it's the elephant in the room. Do we need standardized tests? And do we need to test the kids as often as we test them? This past year, LA Unified teachers voiced their objection to standardized testing and the continued what are called benchmark testing or periodic assessments by holding a demonstration. And the question is, and I've had this conversation with many, many teachers, and I'm actually going to be bringing in some teachers as guests over the course of this semester, so you'll be able to ask classroom teachers. And if some of you out there are classroom teachers and you would like to come in and be a guest, then you just need to email me and let me know. But I ask them the same question all the time, which is, are you using the results to change what you're doing? And some of you that I know had a course with me over the past summer, we addressed these questions, which is, are we testing the kids to death, but are we using the tests to change what we do? There's a whole world out there called reflective practice. And it goes way beyond some of the different stories. For example, I remember when I was a kid, and we would get, we would get a test or an assessment. It doesn't necessarily have to be a test. And we wouldn't get the test back for a week. Or we would take a test, and the teacher would get the results and go on to the next day just like nothing had ever happened. And you keep wondering, shouldn't you go back and change the way that you presented it to us? But when I was a kid, there wasn't as much known about learning and motivation as there is now. As we'll get to in a few weeks, there's a whole world out there about multiple intelligences now. We know that kids have different preferences for how they learn. Bottom line is this: when you get into a classroom and you have to deliver periodic assessments, will you change what you're doing as a result of these assessments? And it's a huge discussion that goes on in classrooms and in faculty meetings all the time. I facilitate these kind of meetings with schools regularly, which is, what do we do and how do we do this different? When we get to the motivation part of the course, one of the things that we're going to talk about is this. There's a distinction between ability and effort. Can the kids specifically in this context, can the kids do what it is that we're asking them to do? If you've got a student, for example, that is operating at a first grade reading level and you teach sixth grade, and for those of you that think that's totally far-fetched, when I taught sixth grade in LA Unified a number of years ago, I got a student in the classroom that had finished all the years, kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, and came to me in sixth grade with the sight vocabulary of approximately 7 words. And I said, this is impossible. And we tested the child, and lo and behold, this was in fact the truth. How did the kid get by? Well, kids have developed survival skills. And so as you start looking at what are we using assessment for, the answer is simple. We're using assessment to change practice, to develop our skill set. And this is why professional development is so important in our schools. And that's one of the sad parts about the recent budget cuts that are going to our schools, which is one of the first pieces that are getting cut out of school budgets is professional development, to bring experts in to go and help improve the practice of the teachers. So it's truly a unique situation. For those of you that are creative teachers, budget crisis is not that big of a deal. Because if you get depleted resources, you still can go to a variety of domains. For example, one of the questions we're going to address later in the course is, what's the role of technology in education? How do you use technology? Because kids are changing. For example, let's look at the standardized testing question again. Our standardized tests, and that's the fun part about this course, is that we get to ask the questions and let it hang out there for a while and see if we can kick this around and figure this out. But if we're going to have a kid sit and take a test for 2 or 3 hours, for example, let's take even a 50-minute test. Is it a direct connect with how kids think and learn nowadays? I know, for example, a lot of my daughter's teenage friends, and my daughter comes home from school, opens up Facebook, opens up email, opens up the texting on the phone, If they have dictionary work to do, which I hope they don't have, but they can go to dictionary.com and they cut and paste. Kids are web savvy now. I mean, they go and I took my daughter to USC. We went to Doheny Library. My younger daughter was going into 6th grade. And I went and I was just walking her around to show her the college, and it was fun. And we went into this one section where I used to go and do my research as an undergraduate there. And I said, this is where the card catalogs are. And she said, well, what's a card catalog? And I said, well, it's it was like a file that you would pull out, and you would look through the file, and you would find the book that you would need, and then you would go into the stacks, and you'd go find the book. And she said, well, why didn't you just use a computer? And I said, well, we didn't have computers back then. And she said, you didn't have a computer? And it hit me really at that moment that, the kids today, they think differently. They process information differently, which is why one of the keys to this course is how do we learn? So when you look at standardized tests that are 50 minutes or an hour or longer, with kids whose attention spans shift from thing to thing to thing, are we making it, is this a fair fight? Or is it right what Katie Couric had to say, which is teachers are they forced to teach to the test? And that's going to be a battle I am sure that you will have in your head, because many teachers and teacher credential candidates that I get in this course year in and year out, one common theme amongst most all of them is that they don't love the idea of testing and testing all the time and then having your job be weighed on the outcome of standardized testing, because everybody knows teachers do far more than just teach what is on that test. I don't care what grade you teach. You play nurse, you play custodian, you play psychologist, you play coach, you play life coach, you play, everything. You're doing everything. So when we come back to that question, are standardized tests the necessary evil? I think the question really comes back to one of how do we define the term insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over and over again, but expect a different result. So testing really is necessary, but only if we're using it to change practice. But then that opens up a whole other set of questions, like how do we get to reflective practice as a paradigm? What does it mean to reflect? And these are all things that we're going to work on this semester. And what I'm looking forward to, and again, I know we're taping this, so we're not live tonight, but we will be live each week. And I'm looking forward to having you call in and text in, so we truly can have this as a conversation piece. And you can see the number there. Please write it down and learn it, and call in regularly so we can have a conversation. But if we go back to the standardized testing question for a minute, one of the questions that we have truly is, what options do we have? And last year, this country voted overwhelmingly to bring new leadership to the country. In fact, it was a wonderful process. Education was at the crux of a lot of these discussions and debates. And our current president actually did say and was quite vocal about what he would do differently. And so I have a video clip here that's just about 4 minutes. And I think that if you listen to this, knowing that this video was shot prior to when President Obama came into office, especially with some of the recent developments that have been coming out, I think it's an interesting point of reference for people to watch. So if we can bring up that video, the question I want you to think about is he right? So let's go to the video.
I would not reauthorize No Child Left Behind without some fundamental changes. And I'll focus on a couple. Number one, I think the assessment tools that we're using to measure annual, yearly progress are inadequate. And in crafting the bill, I don't think that we did a good job getting ownership from teachers with respect to how they were going to be assessed. And it's created enormous resentment all across school districts that that I've been traveling here in Iowa, but also in my home state of Illinois and across the country. Now, I believe in high standards, and I believe that the status quo is unacceptable. And so we should be constantly looking to ratchet up performance in our schools. But not every school is going to start in the same place. And the problem right now that we've seen is that you set very high measures that have to be met. Otherwise, schools are going to be penalized. And you don't give enough resources to make sure that they can actually meet those measures. In some cases, it's not possible for them to meet those measures realistically. And so what I would prefer, and you know, there's going to be a lot of discussion of this in Congress, is let's set up a growth model where we are tracking progress on an annual basis, and we are saying that the trajectory of school performance and student performance has to be improving each and every year. But we recognize that not every school is going to start off at the same place. A school with a huge number of students are getting a free lunch program.
So would you abolish the expectation that all students shall be proficient in math and reading by 2013-14?
What I would do is to say that all students can reach that goal, but that they're going to be moving at an uneven pace. And we have to acknowledge that reality, that we shouldn't be taking away resources from school districts that are doing a terrific job. If children are starting at 3 years behind grade level in reading, and they end up making up 2 of those years, but they're still a year short, that school district is doing a good job, and we should provide them the resources to keep on doing a good job, as opposed to punishing them because they've dropped down a year short. So I think that we've got to make some modifications in how we're assessing performance. That doesn't diminish the expectation that all children can learn. They may not all learn at the same pace. They may not get to the same point at the same time. And if we measure performance realistically, then what we're not going to get is the sort of gaming the system that you're seeing in some states, where they look and they say, you know what, we're not going to make these annual yearly performance goals. So what do? We lower the state standards so that Mississippi can claim that it's 86% of its kids are meeting the annual yearly performance goals, and it turns out that when they take the national test, they rank last in math and science.
So these are enormous questions that people are facing. These are questions that are driving faculty meetings, and I sit with teachers regularly, and this is the question that is driving a lot of them to serious levels of frustration. When you look at what the argument may be is, does infusing the system with more money, does that necessarily solve the problem? And as you will see when you complete your signature assignment work, one of the things that you'll find is that teaching is truly multifaceted, and you really have to develop a series of tools, which are going to be tools that you're going to be developing as you go throughout your coursework here. But how do we support schools that are not making annual, yearly progress? Because one of the things that you start to see is with kids that have this, there's a term called a self-fulfilling prophecy, which many of you probably know, where, you know, if you believe something, there's a strong likelihood that it's going to come true. And what you also find is that people start to behave based on how they expect the outcome to be. And so if you're dealing with schools that have experienced failure year after year after year, and the other piece that goes along with this is extraordinarily high administrative turnover year after year after year, it tends to be an area where there's a large amount of frustration. Some of the questions that come out of the No Child Left Behind work and the work and the conversations that Obama's been having and the conversations our state have been having are, should we post teachers, students' scores? Is that a motivating piece? I mean, I want you to think, for example, as a new teacher, or if you're a veteran teacher that's coming back and participating, I'll give you a quick story. When I was teaching middle school in LA Unified, we had one year in particular where the principal came in, and we were a model school. And this was literally what was called a model urban school. And posted our test scores with our names next to the student test score. And I can tell you that waiting for your name to come up, and we didn't know what our scores were, was kind of horrifying. And if the immediate thing that you start doing is, well, wait a minute, well, I have students that are a little more, poorly behaved than other teachers, and it instantly became a cover-up for yourself, and you were trying to protect your own sense of self-worth. So when you start looking at that, is it smart to post student scores? Now, granted, statistically, and we're going to look at a few statistical pieces a little later, but when you think statistically, there is a way that you can what's called norm your students' progress. We can easily take a look at how you basically create similar classes. It's called norming. And can we create that in a classroom? And fundamentally, the research and statisticians will tell you overwhelmingly, of course you can. But reality, theory, and practice often get a little cloudy. But then the other question to really ask, one of the things that I like to try to do when I work with schools, although it's fairly uncomfortable for people, but I think that's important to be uncomfortable in certain things, is asking, is the system broken? And then defining what the system is. I often joke with people when I do trainings, and I ask them to reflect on their middle school or their high school experience. And I say, how many of you, you got sort of the read chapter 3, do lesson 2, and answer the questions in the back of the book, and you could go through an entire sequence of learning and do fairly well in the class by literally reading something like, what were the 3 causes of the Civil War? And then they flip through the book and read just for the 3 causes. If you know what I mean, you open up the book and you're saying, the 3 causes, the 3 causes, the 3 causes. Then you find it. And then you copy verbatim from the book onto a worksheet, turn the worksheet in, you get an A in the course, and yet, a year later, when you're asked what the 3 causes of the Civil War are, you have no idea. So the question really becomes, is the system broken? And then the other questions that come along with it are, who can fix it? Because I don't think the teachers are broken. I don't think the administrators are broken. And when we look at, and this is the critical lens that we're going to look at with this course, which is, how can you, as a future or current teacher, become empowered to solve your own problems? And I think one of the things that you have to do first is define what the problem is. And so that's one of the, it's kind of like when I go back to thinking about Bill Clinton as president, I think one of the things that he said was, it depends what the definition of is. Well, you have to define, what the problem is before you can start solving it. I think too many people are trying to fix the system without stopping for a minute and defining, what is. And so there's lots of elephants in the room. One of the true elephants in the room is the question, which is, can all children learn? This is an ability and effort piece here. Not are all children motivated to learn, but can all children learn what we need them to learn in the year that they are? For example, let's go back to the child I referenced earlier. I taught 6th grade. I had a kid that came in that was reading at kindergarten, maybe a 1st grade level. Is there any way she could experience success in that course? And by success, I'm going to go back to what we're framing tonight with, which is, could she, was a she, pass the standardized test at a rate that would help the school? And the answer obviously is no. So that there is one way that the system is broken. How do we keep kids? And how do we prepare kids? And how do you create systems of accountability to come full circle back to No Child Left Behind? What is the best? If No Child Left Behind is not the way to go, what is? And these are systems that people grapple with regularly, because the bottom line that people are looking at is, why can't Johnny read? And if you just leave it sitting out there for a minute. I worked for a number of years in the Santa Monica College athletic department. I was the academic, what they referred to as the academic athletic director. I basically worked with all of the student athletes on academic pieces. And it stunned me how many of these young men and women were coming to us. And when they took a placement test, they literally had finished and graduated high schools. And I had students from Florida, New York, Washington State, Texas, California. I mean, you can go down the gamut. And you would have a large number of kids that literally took a test, an assessment test, couldn't pass it. So why can't Johnny read? Well, the other question to ask that is this in fact the question? Because what you get when you talk with a lot of teachers is maybe it's not an ability question, which is what's on the bottom of the screen, or what was on the bottom of the screen of why can't Johnny read, but maybe the question really is, why won't Johnny read? There's a great book out there, and I know all of you are going to have tons of time for extra reading now, but there's a great book by a guy named Herb Cole called I Won't Learn From You, and it's about kids that invest energy in not learning. That's going to be a great problem for you. It's going to be a good problem. Problems are not necessarily bad, but the problem that you're going to be faced with is when you have a kid that's struggling, is the problem that they can't do the work or that they won't do the work? Because you're going to look at the child and you may not necessarily be able to figure out what the difference is. So one of the things that we're going to be doing as we go through this course is really taking a look at what can you do? What does the theory say and what does the practice say and what do the field experts say? That's the part that I'm really looking forward to, is bringing people in and asking them, what is good teaching? So when you look at the difference between the kid that maybe can't learn and the kid that won't learn, what tools are you going to develop in your next few semesters here at Cal State Dominguez that are going to help you? And I can tell you overwhelmingly that the instruction you're going to have here is going to prepare you to be an outstanding teacher in the classroom. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a quick break. And we're going to come back in a moment with a representative from Junior Achievement of Southern California. So hang in there, and we'll be right back. You are watching.
Please join me to CSA graduation. Many of you will have the opportunity to lead our country. Who will be amongst President of the United States from this crowd of graduates here today? Right for you, that you have every opportunity.
Hi, my name's Angelica. I'm
I'm Clara Weston, and I transferred from El Camino College to Hills in fall 2007. The reward I received was the Humanities and Arts Reward for my project on street vendors. My instructor, Dr. Erica Berber, she was encouraging all the students in our class to submit their work because she thought it was very good and something that the general public would be interested in. I got a chance to network with a lot of students who are researchers and also to attend several presentations and see the level of work that is being presented here on this campus, which is very good.
Jamie McCourt. But today especially, today I want you to imagine, think about what you will do with your education, your knowledge, and your wisdom to improve your neighborhood, your community, and if you're really, really lucky, your country, and perhaps the world. So go forth, do well, and your legacy will be measured in lives touched. Thank you.
This is my university.
Hey, Mark, nice picture. You're watching DHTV, the broadcast program service of California State University, Dominguez Hills.
And you have been watching Educational Psychology, Teacher Ed 402. And so far what we've done for the first bit of the course is we've taken a look at the course overview, and if you haven't figured out by now, it's a good idea to read your syllabus about 4 or 5 times. It's on blackboard.com as we speak. We got to look at No Child Left Behind. And we've taken a little look at that and talked about what good teaching may constitute and some of the challenges that you may or may not face when you get into the classroom. One of the things that I found as I taught for several years in LA Unified, in fact 9 to be specific, is that one of the best ways to reach kids, and we're going to talk about what is good teaching and what is good learning as we go throughout this semester, and it's a conversation I always love to have with students. But one of the real ways to truly engage kids is to give them a sense of realism, a sense of how does this, like, you know, the kids ask one question: what does this have to do with me? Why should I care? I'm not going to say the student ever said that to me, but they did. But one of the things that I found is that if you can bring real life to them, real life challenges and real life problems to them, it makes sense. And so a number of years ago, what I did was I used a relationship with an old friend to ask if I could bring a preset curriculum to my teacher credential candidates, to get them in front of kids so they can start teaching and see what it feels like to have a kid and engage them with curriculum. And my relationship with Junior Achievement of Southern California over the last 5 years has sort of grown into truly understanding, you know, how do you engage students into learning. And so the person that I'm actually going to be bringing in here is the Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships. Her name is Amanda Sattler, and I've had the good fortune of knowing Amanda for a couple of years now. We've worked together, and we're going to basically have a nice question and answer period about what Junior Achievement is and about what they do. And I'd like to welcome Amanda to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for coming. And so if you could just tell me a little bit about what the history of Junior Achievement and how it came to be.
A little overall of Junior Achievement is we are a nonprofit organization. We've actually been around for a long time, since 1919. We were set up as an after-school organization as a way to bring kids in and give them practical life skills where they learned how to run their own business, give them something positive to do. Not much has changed. You get kids in an after-school environment doing something positive, and they're not getting in trouble and bad things are happening. So we still have that program today, but now we have 25 programs for kindergartners through 12th graders, and they are all experiential, hands-on programs for students. We believe in motivational hands-on learning, which is very in alignment with what you've been talking about with your students here. And our program teaches kids really about 3 things: entrepreneurship, financial education, and workforce readiness. And we do that with a special recipe. Our mission is to inspire and prepare young people to succeed. The inspiration piece for Junior Achievement is the utilization of a volunteer, as you're very well aware. We use volunteers from the business community. We utilize parents. We use college students. Basically, anyone who has a desire to inspire the next generation of Americans here in the U.S. We are actually a global nonprofit organization now. We have a local office here in Southern California, and we cover from Orange County up to San Luis Obispo. But we have offices in all 50 states, and we now actually have offices all around the world in about 115 countries. So it's a little overview of Junior Achievement. We have a few different implementation models. Mostly what we do is partnering up caring adults with the standards-based hands-on curriculum with a teacher, and they go to that classroom on a weekly basis and bring their real-world experience into the classroom. And oftentimes people say, why don't you just have teachers teach the program? We believe it's this unique partnership with the teacher and the volunteer that allows the students to see another perspective. For someone to say, hey, we're talking about financial education today. Here's what I do in my job. I'm a banker. This is what I do. Or here's something I wish somebody would have told me when I was in middle school about managing my finances or starting my own business. So that's really what our program's all about, inspiring these kids and preparing them to succeed.
Now, it would seem to make a little sense that right now would be a prime time to get people's knowledge of financial literacy up.
It is a prime time, and especially given what's going on with the economy. I say oftentimes people ask me, well, you're a nonprofit, you know, it must be difficult right now. And I'm like, well, for junior achievement, I'd say it's the best of times, the worst of times. The best of times is we no longer have to spend our time convincing people that financial education is important. We saw what happened when you have a financially illiterate population and you combine that with unethical business and political practices, and we kind of had the perfect storm for the economy. I'm proud that Junior Achievement teaches children both those things, about financial education and about the importance of ethics in the workplace and the way you conduct your business. You know, worst of times, it's harder to raise money than it's ever been before, but we're entrepreneurial and we're going to continue to find a way because kids need JA now more than ever.
And what kinds of experiences, if you look, and I know, and I'm going to preface this by telling, you know, I've taught a number of the courses of Junior Achievement. In fact, it's one of the things that I've really enjoyed, mainly because the curriculum is so nicely laid out. And that what we can't show now is that one of the things that we find is that they come with packets for a lot of these different courses. And for those of you, we're going to talk about what your opportunity with Junior Achievement is, because this one is fantastic. Trust me. But they have K-12 curriculum. It's all aligned to the state standards. It comes with this great kit. The reason why I like teachers to try to implement this program is because it shows you what a good lesson plan looks like. It gives you everything that you need, all the materials and all the supplies, and truly it is a nonprofit. And these kits are high quality kits. And the reason why I share that with you is simple, is that as you start looking at teaching, and especially as you go through your coursework here, one of the things that you're going to be finding is that you're going to have to design lesson plans. And it's easy if you have a good anchor to go from. And so the reason why I'm sharing that with you is because that's not necessarily the option that you have. However, it may be an option. What I wanted to ask you about, Amanda, now was, you know, what are some of the, if you have, some of my students out there are going to be interested in teaching first grade, second grade, sixth grade, 10th grade, what are some of the different experiences that people, regardless of whether they're teacher credential candidates or people from the business world, what are some of the experiences that people can go in and do with the curriculum?
What it really looks like, as you mentioned, with this set curriculum that comes in a case, is we really give all of our volunteers a briefcase, pretty much, with structured lesson plans and packaged hands-on activities for the kids, which especially for future teachers is nice because you're not creating the activities for the young people to do. And all of our lesson plans are packaged in a way that every single lesson, the volunteer is leading the students through an introduction and discussion for maybe 3 to 5 minutes, and then leading the students, really facilitating a hands-on experiential learning experience to apply what those terms are that they just talked about. So this kit that every volunteer gets allows them to be a teacher if they've never been a teacher before, because we've done all of that homework for them. But what the experience looks like, I'll use a third grade for an example. Our programs correlate with the students' social studies curriculum in elementary. And in the third grade, students are learning about the city around them. So Junior Achievement's program is called Junior Achievement Our City, where students learn about the different businesses in the city. You know, how do you start a small business in the city? What are the different zones of the city? And one of the businesses in the city is a bank, and how do you manage your money, and how do you start your own business? And it's really a lot of fun. For example, in one of the lessons we walk the students through how to create your own business plan. And people say, there's no way a third grader can create a business plan. Well, it's actually pretty simple. You know, you lay out some specific objectives for the students and they create their own restaurant. So it's really about facilitating these dynamic learning experiences for the kids where they are able to apply what they've been learning in the classroom to the real world.
What are some of the, I don't want to put you on the spot here, what are some of the most unique or interesting ideas that you've heard these third graders come up with in terms of business plans?
I had a lot of fun with one class. I was teaching a group of third graders, so we've got 7 and 8-year-olds there pretty much. And Billy wanted to start a bacon restaurant. And I'm like, okay. So Billy wants to have a bacon restaurant. And I said, Billy, why do you want to have a bacon restaurant? And he said, because my mom won't let me have bacon at home. So he created his whole business plan around having a bacon restaurant. The marketing plan was all around pigs. They played hip-hop music. And the first person he hired was his brother, because he wanted to, he said he wanted to boss him around. It was pretty unique. And of course, with the third graders, it's always very funny. But they really come up with very innovative restaurants. And the thing that's always very interesting and touching is oftentimes, especially students in the urban inner city schools, they want to create restaurants like they've seen on TV, or maybe they've seen in other places that they don't have access to. And so they start dreaming and making those dreams a reality by simply putting them down on paper. And when they walk home and mom says, what'd you do at school today? I wrote a business plan, and that's empowering and that's exciting for them.
Well, one of the pieces that I didn't touch on when I was introducing the Junior Achievement Curriculum, one of the things that's so nice about it is that it is focused on social studies. And unfortunately, what really doesn't get discussed a lot out there, especially for some of my students that are going to be teaching elementary school, is that with the No Child Left Behind stuff we were talking about before the break, is that with the high focus on reading and math, that unfortunately a lot of teachers willfully admit, and they feel bad about it, but they end up having to really diminish both the social studies curriculum and the science curriculum. And so this really is a unique way to start getting at the social studies curriculum.
Very true. And we hear from a lot of teachers that it helps them in a highly memorable way with the students to bring social studies into the classroom, as that's something that they can't focus as much time on. So many teachers have shared with us, here's a way for someone else to come in from the real world, share their experience with the students, and highlight these themes that we haven't been able to spend as much time on. And it's proven through testing that students who go through the Junior Achievement program in social studies outperform their peers. So it's a unique learning model, but it really works and it has high impact for the amount of time that the volunteer spends with the students.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what because that's the essential question that's going to drive the whole...
What is the time commitment? What do they want me to do? So if you're one of our traditional classroom-based volunteers, the commitment at the elementary level is to teach 5 lessons to the students. Again, 5 that are laid out by Junior Achievement. Each lesson at the elementary level takes between 30 and 50 minutes to deliver. So the reality is, for elementary, you need to attend an orientation, which is about 90 minutes. And then you have about 30 to 60 minutes of preparation before each lesson, and then setting up a schedule with the teacher. Usually we recommend once a week for 5 weeks to deliver the lessons to the students. And of course, as everybody knows, especially in elementary, even when a substitute teacher comes to the class, the students get really excited. So imagine, we're 8 years old again, and someone who's not your mom and not your teacher comes to the class to teach you this, and the students really get excited. And after a few lessons, really start to build a bond with their volunteer. We also have the same opportunity to match you up with a middle school or high school teacher. And at the middle school level, the commitment is to teach 6 lessons. And it gets a little bit more topical in nature. For example, one of our programs in middle school is called the Economics for Success. And I love this program because it starts off by showing students the economic benefits of an education. Again, getting to that relevancy issue. Students, why am I learning math? Why am I learning English? Why do I have to learn how to read? And through the use of board games, show students the benefit of, from an earning standpoint, how much more money they'll be able to earn if they stay in school. And we're not saying success is a four-year college degree or a high school diploma. Success is different for everybody else, but it really shows the students that it's easier to get to that place the longer that you stay in school and try to advance your skills. And then after we paint that picture of the economic benefits of an education, the students learn real-world budgeting skills. So from a financial management standpoint, how are they going to also meet their goals, and just learn a lot of practical life skills about all the different careers available to them. So it's very much teaching life skills to the young people.
Every semester that we incorporate junior achievement, and I always get a couple of students that say, well, wait a minute, why are we teaching kids financial literacy? Why are we teaching kids entrepreneurship? They need to learn the basic skills, and why are we going to, you know, like what's the proof that this stuff actually has any benefit? I mean, and there have been studies that, that junior achievement has done.
Yes, there have been several studies, and it's proven that students who have had 3 junior achievement programs are 90% more likely to finish high school. And the piece of that we hear over and over again from the kids is it showed me why I was in school. It showed me why I was learning math. And it finally gave them a connection to the real world. In addition, you know, folks often say, you know, what's the point of teaching entrepreneurship? Well, you look at all the different learning styles. The most successful entrepreneurs generally weren't the best book learners in the classroom. Maybe several of them are folks with learning disabilities and didn't thrive in traditional classroom environments. These are the highly creative people who motivated and might have a lot of energy. And we know not everyone in the class is going to be an entrepreneur. But applying entrepreneurial thinking to everyday life, being a problem solver, seeing a need, being able to fill it and put together a plan on how to do that, that could be used in everything from mapping out how you're going to be successful in a class to how are you going to help your family make ends meet by the end of the month, you know, and pay the bills. So it's practical. We know not every student in the classroom is going to be the next Bill Gates, but these skills are something that can help anyone.
Yeah, so it sounds like one of the things that you're talking about, one of the things that we're going to be getting at later in the course, which really looks at critical thinking. And we, you know, one of the things that we talked about before the break really had to do with the ability to diagnose what the problem is. And I think that one of the things that I remember when I taught junior achievement, again, I taught it 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. And I need to go teach it in the middle school, but to be honest,
since your daughters are there. I don't know if they want to see you, though, at campus.
They don't want to see me. That's why I'm no longer allowed to do it.
Okay.
But one of the things
You're
that
no
I
longer
remember
cool.
was, this is true. You know, I remember things like, you know, in 2nd grade, they were making like the donut shops, and then, you know, then they had to design a business and pick a place, you know, on Earth. I want to say that was 4th grade, where they had to pick a place on Earth, but they wanted the business. They had to go and access natural resource. And I remember, you know, comparing this, because this was just a few years ago, and I remember thinking, you know, like the levels of the thinking that they were doing really does supplement the types of instruction that the teachers are trying to do, but unfortunately don't have the time to do it. And sometimes it's just nice when you have somebody else come in and deliver the instruction. But so teachers have an opportunity to go in and teach this. But then necessarily for what we're looking at this semester, you and I have actually talked about another alternative, which is this is something that I've never been to this place, but I have heard more about this than can be imagined. And so can you sort of share with my group here what the opportunity is for them?
Yes. What Dr. Miller is discussing is our new experiential learning facility, J.A. Finance Park. And the best way to try and describe this is it is a 10,000 square foot simulated city, where we joke where it's where Wall Street meets Main Street. Within this large facility, there are actually 18 branded storefronts. For example, the retail bank is Chase. The insurance agency is State Farm. The car dealership is Toyota. And what happens is in Finance Park is students are taught by their teacher in the classroom 19 preparation lessons. This is for middle school and high school students, and then they come to Finance Park for a culminating capstone experience where they really apply what they've been learning in the classroom. And what I love about it, I think the best way to try and describe it is to take you on the journey of what happens with the students when they get there.
No, I know that we have a website that we can look at, so if we can bring the website up, and maybe you can...
There is actually a picture or two on there. So if you bring up jasocal.org, great, I see it there. And if someone could click on the Finance Park tab straight above there, correct, you will see lots more information, especially there on the side. There are some frequently asked questions. There are agendas for the day, many different things. But what happens with the students at Finance Park is usually we have anywhere from 60 to 150 middle school or high school students in the facility at one time. And when they walk in, they're all given an ATM card. And so
not a real ATM card.
Not a real, but it's real when they're in JA Finance Park. And on the back of that ATM card, they are given a new life identity. So Billy is no longer 14 years old from the local middle school. He might now be 42. He might be married, making $55,000 working at the insurance agency, and he might have 2 kids. And his best bud that he walked in might be working at the gas station, making $22,000 a year, might have 2 kids, and might not be married. It was cute. A couple weeks ago, we had a student walk up and say, "There's a mistake on my card." And our Finance Park director goes, "Well, what's the mistake?" And the young lady says, "Well, I have 3 students. I have 3 kids, but I'm not married." And so there are very unique learning experiences that are happening. So they're given this new life identity. And for the next 4.5 hours when the kids are in the park, they are this person. And what we do is we have the students break down that salary into a gross monthly budget and a net monthly budget. And they are charged with going shopping at all of the different stores in the park. And unique things start to happen when they realize just how much money they do have. And they have to make choices just like adults do. And for example, every student that comes through Finance Park has to purchase a home. They can't live with mom and dad, much to many of their chagrins. And
I hope my daughter's heard that.
Okay, yeah. And if they want to purchase a car, many of the young gentlemen get very upset because they all like to have a Porsche. And they might have 2 kids and they don't also fit in that Porsche. Or they might want to have the F-150 truck with, the great rims and everything. And we're like, well, great. Well, on $19,000 a year, you'll also be living there.
Right.
So the role of the unique role of the volunteer in JA Finance Park, which is what we want to engage your students in doing, is instead of going to a classroom and teaching a lesson, they're coming into really this learning lab where these students are given these new identities. And we try to partner up every volunteer with 6 middle school or high school students, and you really work as a coach during the day. So you're still facilitating all of these different experiential learning experiences the students are having, but also making sure they're progressing through the program, and you're really there answering their questions. And I know a lot of people right now are going, oh my gosh, I don't know how to manage my own finances. How am I going to help the students through this? Well, the great thing is the morning of, an hour before the students get there, we provide an in-depth orientation and training for all of the volunteers.
How long does that take?
60 minutes.
Okay.
So it's not bad in the least bit. So we also provide basically an outline for the day. Yes, we do provide the answers to the questions, so they won't have to make them up. They will have an answer book with them there with the students. And I'd say of all the volunteer opportunities we have, we constantly hear from people that this was the most fun, and it was also the least intimidating to get started, because for many folks that have not had the opportunity to teach in front of a large group of people, this gives people the opportunity to get their feet wet in a smaller environment. I mean, there will be 120 to 150 students there, but you're going to be working more with a small group. And the extraordinary opportunity for the students is to observe the students' behaviors through the process. All of the students' different learning styles, what makes them make the different decisions that they do. And I've personally volunteered for this program many times, and is always very encouraging to me. Of course, there's usually a quiet student in the group, and I had one a long time ago, and he was very, very quiet, so of course I was trying to engage with him, and he later tells me that the other kids in the group had been picking on him, and he was the one that finished the simulation first, and he balanced his budget, where some of his peers did not. And the empowered sense of self that that young man had when he was leaving, and when the other kids in the group were saying, well, how did you finish early, and how did you make that happen, it gave him the opportunity to shine. And folks might be thinking, what real impact am I having on young people that day? And the truth of it is we know really nobody's teaching young people about financial education. It's not yet a mandate in California schools, so it's not being taught during the school day. There's a common misconception that it's being taught at home. And we've had everything from students leave the park and saying, what did you learn? Share with us, I learned, man, my mom really sacrificed so that I could wear these tennis shoes I'm wearing right now. It was a very sobering moment for some students, especially such the diverse population we work with here in Southern California, from kids who've had everything and from kids who really have basically nothing from a material standpoint. And one of my favorite stories was the first day Finance Park was open, we had students in from Santee Learning Complex in downtown Los Angeles. And at the end of the day, we had a young girl go through checkout, and she grabbed the arm of one of my coworkers and she said, thank you. My coworker said, well, what for? And she said, you saved my life today. My coworker was like, can you explain that a little bit more? And this young lady went on to share that no one in her family knew how to make money and how to pay the bills, and that they were constantly moving around and going through the similar challenges that young people do in poverty across Southern California every day. And she said, now I know how to do this. I can go home and show my family, and most importantly, I can teach my 3-month-old daughter, and I know that we're going to be okay. So a lot of people might go, oh, financial education, entrepreneurship, it's not important. But what it comes down to is empowerment and equipping people to give them the skills to be successful on their own. And we see that happen in many different ways in Finance Park. So it's a lot of fun. It is a one-day volunteer commitment. So
not the 5 or the 6?
It's not the 5. The beauty of it is, from if I were a student watching this video, I'd be thinking, oh my gosh, I have all these reading assignments. I need to go check, observe students in the classroom. Here, you don't have to, with the Finance Park experience, you don't have to attend a separate training up front and then prepare the lesson plans and then go to the school 5 times. You come to JA Finance Park one time. And the facility is in the Burbank area. We're right over by Universal Studios, so it's pretty central in Southern California for folks to get to. We ask the volunteers to arrive usually around 8 a.m., and they have the training from 8 to 9 a.m., and then the buses show up with all those students, and so we prepare you before the students get there, and the students come. We give the students an orientation for a half an hour or so, where the volunteers can again watch the orientation the students are having. We break them up into the groups, and the volunteers and the students have this extraordinary experience that lasts until about 2 o'clock together every day. So the volunteer commitment is really showing up, blocking off the 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock. If you make the commitment to come. And the way that you sign up is, I'm sure that's the next thing most of them are thinking, is, as you see, we put our website up earlier, so www.jasocal.org. And the easiest way to sign up is at the top. There is a tab that says Get Involved. So your students, you need to do 3 things. You need to click on Get Involved, and then you need to click on Volunteer Opportunities, JA Finance Park Sign Up. So it's pretty simple. You go to the website, go to Get Involved, Volunteer Opportunities, JA Finance Park Sign Up, and we will have a calendar of all the different open days that we have kids booked to be in the park. And literally, your students can put their name, their email address in, their information, click on the day that works for them, and it sends an email to our staff who will follow up with them and get them set up for orientation. So it's really, they sign up online, they show up on the day they commit, and they have this experience with the young people.
Well, and then comes the part that they get to turn in for me, which,
yes.
which to
I'm
be
sure
honest,
it's the really fun part. Yeah.
Well, I'm actually making it, what historically they've done. And again, one quick question that's maybe an aside before I tell them I'm going to make them wait on pins and needles.
Okay.
Which is, what if I do have a student out there that has a second or a third grader and maybe says, God, hey, I was listening to Miller talk about working with his kids, and is that a possibility?
Yes, that is a possibility. Just as they went to sign up for Finance Park, they go to that same Get Involved, Volunteer Now, and then it's going to say sign up for elementary, middle, or high school. So they click on one of those, and they're in those opportunities. It's great because there's a place for them to fill in, say, let's say they do have a second grader and they want to teach their second graders class. They can tell us that information online. It will send us an email, and one of our staff will follow up with them to get them started. Perfect. So to do that, they will have to attend an orientation, get their junior achievement briefcase, and prepare their lessons and set up their visits with their teacher.
Okay. And I really can't, obviously express to the students about the value that they get out of this. What they, and to be honest, what they do for me is when they're done with this, regardless if you do the day at Finance Park or whether you want to do one, with your kids, is that they write basically a one-page summary of their experience and link the experience to 5 terms from the course. They can look at that on the syllabus when it's available, but fundamentally what I'm trying to do, and I can direct this directly to my students out there, which is I'm trying to make this such an incentive for you to complete junior achievement. I've been such a fan of junior achievement for a number of years, mainly because when I came in and my initial reaction with junior achievement was I said, I don't understand why kids need the financial literacy. And in fact, one of my friends has been very involved with junior achievement for years, and I just said, okay, I'll try it once. And I had a couple of students that chose not to do this, but in the 5 years or so that I've been doing this and including junior achievement as part of my course, I don't think, maybe I've had 2 people complain about anything, and the only complaint was,
out of how many hundreds? Yeah.
I was going to say probably like 500, 600, and it generally comes back to the point where they say, God, this was fantastic. Because whether you go in front of a group of kids for 5 days or 6 sessions or however the normal curriculum is, or if you do this one day, the important piece is just what you said, which is you're observing these kids interacting. And the idea when you look at all the motivation stuff, which they're going to read in Chapter 10, which I'm sure they can't wait to get back. They're probably like ripping through the book right now to get to it, is that, bottom line is kids have to see what they're doing has to do with where they're trying to go. And a lot of kids have never thought, especially middle school kids, have never thought about, what do I want to be? When I was in middle school, I wanted to play for the Lakers.
Yeah, exactly.
And, that really didn't work out too well.
But guess what? There are many different jobs with the Lakers. You can be in marketing. You can be in human resources. You could be a physical trainer. So that's exactly what this does. It shows kids there's a place in the world for everyone.
And that's the facilitation piece that you mentioned, which is so nice. So, and the good part about this being archived is that the students can go and bring this show back up online on an archive. So if you missed the directions, I will have those posted up on my Blackboard website soon enough. So we can make sure they have that. So I'm gonna thank you for coming on to the show.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for volunteering. I'm looking forward to seeing you all at our facility.
And they will all be there. And we've got just a couple of minutes to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to bring this to somewhat of a wrap by saying what we've tried to cover with you tonight has to do fundamentally with looking at what learning is starting to be. And as we go through the next 14 weeks or the next 15 weeks, however long it is you're going to be reading things about cognitive development and brain development, emotional and social development. There's a lot of terms and a lot of theories and a lot of pieces to try to keep in mind. And it's going to at times feel overwhelmingly overwhelming, not to sort of do the adverb juxtaposition there, but it was kind of fun. And what you're going to really want to try to consider is thinking about how what we're going to be talking about translates into the real world. And fundamentally, that's why I really value opportunities and relationships like Junior Achievement. I mean, my personal goal with Junior Achievement for my students is really that they end up having such a wonderful experience that they contact Junior Achievement at the end of it and say, hey, when I have my classroom, how do I get this from my kids? And that really is how relationships are built. And those are things to consider. So as we start to look to next week on September 9th, we're going to be having another guest by the name of Dennis Douillet come in, and we're going to be looking at things like brain-based education, and we're going to be looking at things like cognitive development. And so what I'm going to really encourage you to do over the next week is to really take a good look at the syllabus and really take a hard look at the course pieces that you have, the questions that you have, and email me if you have concerns. And remember, when we meet next week on September 9th, it's going to be live, and I'm looking forward to having communications with you. And I want to thank you for watching, and I look forward to this semester with you. And so as we start to wrap up, and the music will be coming in shortly, I'm here to support you in whatever way I can, electronically and with each other. So good night. Have a wonderful evening. And I will see you next week.